The Mental Health Spectrum, Part 6, Psychotic Disorders, or as I call them, response patterns. Hello, my name is Jesse. Welcome to the channel Open Source Owners, where we talk about what would it be like if humans had an owner's manual. Well, psychotic disorders would definitely be a part of the owner's manual because this is an affliction that happens to people, and we don't really, in terms of psychiatry and psychology, we don't really understand the origin of psychotic disorders yet. So I think we're making some headspace into understanding the origin of psychotic disorders and then how to treat them and actually resolve psychotic disorders. Again, this is part 6. This is the last of the series. If you haven't seen 1 through 5, go ahead and go back and start watching all of them. We will do a quick overview of psychotic disorders, and then we'll do an overview of the whole series 1 through 6, and then we'll be done and we'll be moving on to something more, to something new and exciting. Moving away from that mental health spectrum, but always reorienting toward mental health and spiritual health as part of the focus of this channel. So let's get into it. Psychotic disorders, or as I call them, response patterns. There's only a few, and we'll go through them quickly. Obviously, we could talk a lot about schizophrenia, for instance, but the main thing about schizophrenia is you already know people with schizophrenia. Many, unfortunately, people who live on the streets, people experiencing homelessness, have schizophrenia or schizophrenic-like tendencies. So you've seen these patterns. Maybe you have somebody in your family who's developed schizophrenia. Usually happens by the early to mid-20s is when it kicks off, and usually there's a triggering event that kicks off somebody's predilection towards schizophrenia that causes this downward cascade. The criteria lists 5 key symptoms, which would include delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized or catatonic behavior. Catatonic just means frozen, and negative symptoms in terms of their mental wellness and their lifestyle. So that's pretty much it. So, people talking to themselves, people hearing messages directly from God or Kanye West or something like that. Confusing, disorganizing speech that doesn't seem to have linear connection. It's hard for the average person to follow sometimes the disorganized speech. And the behavior can be very disorganized, or it can just be frozen and catatonic. And then there's, of course, negative symptoms like maybe not showering, not brushing their teeth, not eating, that type of thing, not taking meds. So that's schizophrenia in a nutshell. It's a divided sort of psyche, and it's a sort of a fractured mind, if you want to think about it like that. Now, similarly is what's called schizoaffective disorder, or schizoaffective response patterns. Schizoaffective disorder forms a link between psychosis and mood. So it has features of schizophrenia like delusions and hallucinations, etc., but it also has mood disorder features as well. So a person with schizoaffective disorder has severe changes in mood, and that's one of the things that separates it, that is the feature that separates it from schizophrenia. But also with some of the features of schizophrenia, such as we've talked about, paranoia, disorganized thinking, delusions, etc. Okay? So people with schizoaffective disorder will often be thought of as having schizophrenia, but you can see there's a slight difference here. One has sort of a mood disorder as well, and the other does not. Both of whom, though, struggle to just sort of like live day to day because their world is very chaotic and sort of disorganized. And then the last one in the psychotic disorders category is the delusional disorder or delusional response pattern. This is characterized by an irritable, angry, and low mood. And of course, there are hallucinations as well as this that are often related to their delusion. So for an example, a person believes he or she has an odor problem, may smell a bad odor. Or a person that believes they are being watched by the government may then see people circling the neighborhood and actually spying on them, even though they're not there, that type of thing, right? So you can see how all 3 of these would sort of link together into what is generally called the psychotic disorders, where it's basically very difficult inside the psyche of somebody with a psychotic disorder to differentiate between reality and non-reality, recognizing, of course, that there is no clear distinction between reality and non-reality. The states of mind that humans can experience run the gamut from psychotic disorders to mystical states all the way to normal, everyday American culture states of mind. But none of that is normal or not normal. It's just, can it be workable? Is it functional? Now, in this space, I want you to check out 2 people. Dr. William Walsh, who's been working with nutrient therapy and the power for mental health and even things like autism to resolve root cause issues by just focusing on nutrients. And you can check out the book. In fact, if you click the link below on my book resources, there's a book of his in there called Nutrient Power, which you can check that out. So he's actually been able to get some benefit. And the other one is Kelly Brogan and her program, Vital Mind Reset, I believe it's called. They've actually documented now with scientific reports the resolution of schizophrenic symptomology through her program, which is really lifestyle, diet based sort of stuff. Now, she is a psychiatrist. She is considered to be among the dirty dozen disinformation doctors. So be forewarned. If anything, though, that should make you more curious about, well, what is she actually talking about? And if you get her book, she's got 2 books, both of which are great. There's not much in there that's scientifically false. So she might have a different paradigm that she's viewing mental health through in the worldview, and you don't have to share that paradigm, but she's not making wild claims. I've read both of her books, and they're based on very basic, good functional medicine science, in my opinion, and she has the results to prove it. So look up some of her research. So go ahead and check that out, especially if you have family members who suffer with schizophrenia or schizoaffective or delusional disorders. Often it's just like drug them, manage their symptoms by drugging them into sort of a kind of a non-functional state of just sort of like symptom masking. That's not really high quality of life. If you really want to get your family member or someone that you love who experiences psychotic disorders free from that, check out those 2 people that I mentioned. That might be a way forward. And I'm sure there's other people in the world that are making improvements into these spaces. If you know any, please comment below and I'll check those out. I'm talking specifically about clinicians who are getting positive, long-term sustainable resolution of psychotic symptoms. That would be something I'd be very curious about. So thank you for that if you have it. Okay, that's it on the psychotic disorders. Let's do a recap of parts 1 through 6. We just finished part 6 here. This is what 1 through 6 is talked about. Part 1 through 3, I know this is small, forgive me. We went through the personality response patterns. Remember, there's cluster A, which includes schizoid personality, schizotypal, and paranoid. Cluster B, which includes borderline, antisocial, narcissistic, and histrionic. That's in part 2 that we talked about that. And then in part 3, we talked about obsessive compulsive personality disorders or personality response patterns, dependent and avoidant. Okay, and then we went to part 4. That was the mood disorders or the mood response patterns. And there's only 4 in here: major depressive, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, which is a less intense version of bipolar 1, and then seasonal affective. Part 5, we covered anxiety response patterns, and those are generalized anxiety, panic, phobias, which there's many of, social anxiety, and separation anxiety. And then in part 6, what we just covered, so this will be easy to remember. Psychotic response patterns are schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and delusional. So keep in mind, up at the very first part, there's schizoid and schizotypal, and then down at the very bottom, there's schizophrenia and schizophrenia. The whole schizoid part just means a split. So anything with a schizoid is recognizing that there's some type of split in the psyche that has then been labeled as a disorder of some type or another, right? So there it is, parts 1 through 6. That's kind of the most important parts of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for you, your life, people you love, people you interact with. Now, you don't have to memorize this. This isn't school. This is just about clarifying personality traits, personality types that you've, of course, interacted with in your life. And it may indeed help you orient yourself in this landscape of mental health, in this spectrum of mental health. You might say, this makes sense. This is why X, Y, or Z. This is why my behaviors do X, Y, or Z. Or this is why, my ex-partner did X, Y, or Z. And that is the goal. Remember, the goal of this is not to shame or to put a label on you or to cause some type of negative reaction in terms of like the nocebo effect. Instead, it's meant to liberate us, to give us insight, to point us in the right direction so that we know what to work on to improve these symptoms if we have them, or to improve these response patterns if they're no longer working for us. So on that note, please download your free 60-page ebook called The Owner's Manual Part 2. This gets you into my email list, what you want to be in. I have a whole year-long series of walking you through the 4 parts that I talk about again and again and again: biological health, psychological health, social health, and spiritual health. So the Owner's Manual as a book, useful, awesome, but the email list, even better, because then you have my guidance. You can interact with me on the email list, and you have my best recommendations in all 4 of those categories to improve your mental health. And on that note, thank you guys so much. This was the Mental Health Spectrum Part 6. This is the end. We covered psychotic disorders, or as I call them, psychotic response patterns. Please comment What does this series make you think of? Have you had any profound insights? Do you know somebody? Are you experiencing psychotic disorders? What has helped? Have you found doctors or practitioners who could actually help with psychotic disorders? All that stuff I want to hear about in the comments below. Until next time, y'all, thank you so much for watching the video this far. We'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves out there. Bye-bye.